Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Live at the Waterhole. We're first up, we're at the wonderful Etosha National Park in Namibia and at the Okukuyu Waterhole. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and well, what does the bush hold in store for us today? You'll have to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And please remember that, as per usual, this is a live and interactive experience. So we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on Twitter, now known as X, and you can use the hashtag WildEarth. You can also join on the YouTube live chat. Now, it looks like there is quite a lot of clouds around, and as we say at this time of the year in the Etosha National Park, we get the small rains around October, November, and then later on going into the new year around January, February is when the bigger rains usually come through. And earlier on I was watching and I did see there was a bit of splattering of rain around, so that's nice. It's probably cooled it off a little bit. However, it does make it a bit more humid and the heat doesn't really dissipate. So I wonder if the animals are going to be feeling the heat today or if it's a bit cooler. And speaking of which, I think let's go and have a look at what the weather is going to be like across all the different locations. So we can see there that it is a typical summer's day across all those wonderful different locations. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them. We do try our best to stick to the waterholes where there's the most action going on. And we often see a lot of animals here at this waterhole. It is one of the most productive. Old Donyo in Kenya is one of those as well. So we do spend a lot of time between these two. But we can see here lots of springbok down. There's probably a couple of, I'm sure there were some black-faced impala with them earlier as well. But it seems like there's hardly a breath of wind. So that does bode well for lovely pictures and reflections as the animals come down to drink. So having said that there is a little bit of rain normally at this time of year in Etosha, it still remains very dry, and it's almost like those clouds seem to suck even more water out of the ground. And that does bode well for us with the animals coming down to drink because there's not any other water sources around. This one here at Okukuyu, it's a very well visited waterhole by elephants, especially when it gets hot a little bit later on in the day. So we can expect them coming through with the heat that does look like it's going to be today in this particular spot and across all the different locations as well. We generally say that they'll come through at the hottest time of the day. So we may have that to look forward to. We often also do see the springbok here being truly a desert adapted animal, not having to drink water in its entire life. But when there is water available, as there is here, they will make use of it. And they also like to go for a swim. Them and the gemsbok or the oryx gazelle, they seem to be the best swimmers here, where the rest of them not so keen to go in as deep as those two. And guten Morgen to Mama Kingham, straight back at you. Nice to have you on board with us. There's a couple of kudu females just making their way through underneath that big, very prominent leadwood tree on the left-hand side. And they often do come from that side. It's from the thickets that are to the south of Okukuyu. They don't generally like being out in the open. So what you see the kudu, they generally come in and have a drink and then head straight back for the thickets. Very similar to the impala, the black-faced impala as well, where the rest of them seem to mill about, especially the springbok and the zebra and the wildebeest and the oryx. They like to spend a bit more time. And it's generally also quite an ebb and flow here. There's very little times when there's hardly any animals here, but it does happen, and the animals come through for a drink, and then they move off, and then there's waves of other animals that come through as well. So Phil from Brighton, nice question around the black-faced impala. They're endemic to Namibia and just the southern parts of Angola, but they're not endangered. It's this pocket of this sort of subspecies of the impala. They're slightly bigger than your common impala. They're slightly darker, and they also, as the name suggests, have quite a bit more black markings on their face. But the numbers are good, and I think, on the IUCN red data list, they're a species of least concern. So very well protected here in the Etosha National Park in particular, and good numbers still remain. Quite a number of bulls come through with these kudu now as well. You see those long spirally horns, nice and easy to tell between the females and the males. The females don't have horns and the males do. And as we see on a lot of the sort of bush preferring species, you see on the kudu, they've got those white stripes coming down the side of their body. And that's what we call disruptive markings. It's just so that they can blend into the bush a bit better. And when predators are looking or trying to pick them out in the bush, it sort of breaks up the outline of their body and assists with camouflage. So that's seemingly what the reason is behind those stripes. It looks to be a beautiful day, though, here in Etosha, and I'm sure that the game drives would have been excellent this morning. So, yellow duck, you asking around communication of the different species here of antelope around this waterhole, and yes, yellow duck, they do communicate with each other. I'm not sure that they quite understand each other's languages. As we hear with a lot of the tourists that are at and visiting this waterhole, you often hear particularly German, French, and you'll hear some Afrikaans from the Namibians as well as the South Africans. So there is communication between the animals as with the humans, but I'm not sure they always understand each other with the different languages that they speak. The springbok, obviously, that they give off, it's quite an unusual grunting sound and croaky. Kudu, they obviously communicate, especially when they see predators, with a very deep booming bark. But when they're at the waterhole here, there's just sort of snorts and grunts and some small contact calls between the species. But yeah, it's difficult to get into the mind of the animals, but they do understand, especially alarm calls from different species, and they all react to it. So I'm pretty sure that they also do have an understanding of the different contact calls when it's relaxed or when it's stressed or anxious, and then they react to that as well between all the different species.
What if you could explore the world from an entirely new perspective? Flying a real drone live without leaving home. This is Nature Eye. Discover our planet's landscapes with a personal guide and a powerful camera. Every flight helps conserve the locations you visit. Book your adventure with Nature Eye.
Water there. And I say dab chicks, however, that's the old name, and a lot of my books are still very outdated, and now it's called The Little Grebe. So I try to be correct, but sometimes I do refer to the old names and not always up to speed. But with that one, it was a dab chick, and now it's a little grebe. So speaking of those ebbs and flows, it seems we're in a little bit of an ebb now. A lot of the kudu moved off, quite a few of the springbok as well. They sometimes have to trek quite far between their feeding and their drinking sites. So come to drink and then need to head back to go and feed. So the sun just poking through the clouds every now and then as this very thin layer of clouds does move through. I can tell you with that rain that did come earlier, I'm pretty sure it's heating up very quickly now in these parts. It's also just important to note that all these white rocks is calcrete as a result of the massive inland sea that was fed by the Kunene River, now shifted to the west because of tectonic movement. But it does result in it being very bright here. So there's been a couple of occasions when I have been on safari here and I've either forgotten or lost my sunglasses, and I spent the rest of the time on safari really struggling with the glare. It's almost like driving around in the snow. Very similar and very bright. So if you ever do plan on going to Etosha, don't forget your sunglasses. Trust me, you will regret it. So Nina, these little grebes, obviously, are one of the little water birds that you will find. We do often see Egyptian geese as well. I see there's none around now, but it's a little bit sort of dry of water birds. We are going to see lots of other water birds at the different locations and on the Africams. But here in particular, because it's in the true desert, it's the driest desert in the world. It's also the oldest desert in the world, and it is one of the smallest deserts in the world. But because it's so dry, the waterfowl sort of maintain themselves more so in the northern boundary, and that's on the Kunene River as well as the Zambezi and the Kavango River, which then leads into the Okavango Delta, as well as in the south, which is around the Orange River, and then just in small pockets in some of the places where there's permanent water sources. But generally speaking, here in Etosha, not that many waterfowl that do find themselves resident. We have flamingos that come through, but you wouldn't necessarily refer to them as waterfowl. And that depends on the rain. Normally around January, February, when there's a lot of rain, then in the southern side of the Etosha Pan itself, there is sort of about 30 centimeters of water that generally then does sit there, and the flamingos then come in to nest when there's enough water, um, both lesser and greater. Maybe later on we'll go across to Kimberley, just outside of Kimberley in South Africa, and Comfortsdam, and that's one of the nesting sites for the flamingos themselves. So we'll see them as well as other waterfowl where there's a lot more water around, and quite different to here in the desert of Namibia. Righty, so we're not always just going to stay at one waterhole, but it's been a lovely start here at Okukuyu in the Etosha National Park, aka the Great White Place. But I think it's time to change of place, and let's head back all the way to South Africa and the Madikwe Game Reserve and Jamala. So we did have a visitor, an elephant, but I think he might have just had a very brief visit. He's just come in, had a quick drink, and off he goes. But I hope that's a sign of things to come. It's just on the border of Botswana here, and also extremely hot, especially at this time of the year. So we can expect more elephants to come through. And it's quite a nice surprise to see that there is a bit more greenery that has started to pop its nose through the ground, because in the recent past it's been extremely dry here, but I was watching and there was a splattering of rain, so it's looking good. I hope there's lots more rain to come. We've been very lucky here at this waterhole as well. Madikwe Game Reserve is known for its wild dog population, and we've seen them here. So it was a group of five. I think it was either five or four. It was young males, a breakaway group, and they spent a lot of time next to this waterhole. And then the elephants came and chased them off, but they turned around and came back. So they were quite brave youngsters. But other than the wild dogs, there's also a very big population of elephants here, over 1,500 of them. Borderline almost overpopulated, but it does make for wonderful viewing, especially when it gets hot and they all come through for a pool party. So let's hope for that. So you can hear a Deirdre's cuckoo calling in the background. Deirdre's. That's what he says. But anyway, now that this elephant has moved off, I think we'll head on over to the Greater Kruger National Park and Djuma. Where I'm very happy to see that there is, I think it might be Dewey, our resident hippo, that has returned into this waterhole. He had disappeared for quite a long time, and you saw there just a couple of passengers. He had some red-billed oxpeckers on his back. They very often look for wounds on the hippo, and any wounds would then spell blood, and that's exactly what the oxpeckers feed on. They're sanguinivores, as we say, blood feeders. And so very often the hippos, when they fight with each other, they leave gaping wounds, and the oxpeckers will try and cut that open and feed on it. They do feed obviously on parasites, most notably ticks, but especially when they've gorged themselves and they're full of blood. So they're not after the arthropods themselves, they're after the blood. And so if they can keep a wound open, they actually become parasitic. And we see that a lot when they're on hippos. Rather windy here though, so you might see the camera wobbling a little bit, but it's obviously just down to the wind. And a hot day like this would mean that generally the hippos wouldn't exit the water. They find it quite difficult to thermoregulate. So they spend especially the hot days in the water and then come out at night when it's cooler to go and graze and feed. But when it's cooler during the day or it's overcast and rainy, then you'll often find them coming out and trying to sun themselves to warm up. We see that a lot in winter as well. So winter, we see a lot more of hippos out of the water, and in summer, we generally find them, like Dewey is here now, in the water, as his hitchhikers have returned. They also use the hippo not only to feed on, but a very interesting drinking spot. So Barry, yes, around cicadas, we generally say that they summer active, and pretty much all day you can have them calling. We also used to call them the Christmas beetle. Whenever we used to go down to the coast, that was in summer for Christmas, and that noise would always just remind us of summer, holidays, Christmas, and so that's why we call them the Christmas beetles. But yes, they will call all day during the summer. And that noise, we call it, it's a kind of stridulation. But if you think of a paint tin and the lid, if you push it in and out and it goes ding, gung, ding, gung, ding, gung, that's exactly what the cicada is doing with its body parts, however much faster, and then it produces that sound.
Africam brings the wild to you. Watch the big 5 at our Waterhole cameras. Indulge your passion for birding with the black eagles on the Black Eagle camera, flamingos at Camphor's Dam, and penguins at Stony Point. Listen to the soothing sounds of Lisbon Falls, or witness animals up close at Cat-Eye Pan. Imagine you're at the hide at Aldonyo Lodge, gazing at elephants with the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro as your backdrop. Join us at Africam for an extraordinary wildlife adventure.
It's also that in this particular position, they can be above the water without taking the rest of the body out. It does look like the wind is picking up a bit now. I think it's coming in from the west, so it's probably quite a hot wind as well. West, southwest, but when that wind blows, it does generally heat up. Coming in from the east, normally a little bit cooler, but I don't think there's going to be anything cool about today. So now that Dewey looks like he's going for a little nap and the wind picking up, it's making for rather a wobbly camera. So I think with that in mind, let's head on back to the Tosha National Park. Where we've left the ebb behind and we're now in the flow with lots of springbok having come down to drink. Looks like quite a few of the kudu have already had a drink, some moving off, some maybe still thinking about coming in. Very little wind here though, which is nice. And we've spoken about it quite a lot, but this is one of the only water holes that you'll see the animals not scared of the water, with the crocodiles that would be present in all of the other water holes, and the animals obviously have that the behavior, the anti-predator behavior, just sticking their mouth in as far as or as little as possible, because there's always a chance of being taken out by the flap dogs, aka crocodiles. But here, for thousands of years, there's been no crocodiles at all, and so they've not had to worry. And so they go into the water here. They're really relaxed around the water. They're not scared of it at all, and you will notice the difference when we go to the other water holes and the animals come down to drink. There's a much bigger anxiousness, and you'll never see them going in and wallowing like these springbok are doing now. They also seem to want to go a little bit deeper in. I think it's just quite a bit muddied around the edges where the animals are walking. So if they walk a bit further into the water, they can get fresher water to drink. And I'm sure it tastes a lot better than it being full of mud. There was a giraffe here earlier as well. Took his time, but eventually came down for a drink. Just one on his own. I do hope there'll be some more coming through. They really do take their time and make sure that there's no lions about before they do drink. And it's quite funny to watch as they zigzag, checking left and right and up and down and taking a very long time to come in. And then very often, just as they do get in, a dove flies past and they run back, and then they start the whole procedure all over again. A beautiful sight, this, and reflections with this springbok now. So Antidorcus marsupialis is the Latin name with a springbok, and the marsupial part in the species is as a result of them believing that they were part of the marsupials because of this pouch that they have just to the top of the tail. And it's not really known what it is or the purpose or the use of it, except in displaying when they pronk. But that's about it. And this is a beautiful looking female. I think she's already been for a swim. You see there on the opposite bank, it looks like a Corey bustard that has come in to drink, just in and amongst the springbok there. And it's wonderful to look at the size differences between them, because the Corey bustard is almost bigger than a springbok. See, with the Corey bustard as well, they, much like the doves, they've got a gullet. So they don't have to lift their head up to throw the water down their throat. They can actually just drink with their heads down. As we also have now some black-faced impala coming in and joining both the Corey bustard, the heaviest flying bird in Africa, as well as the springbok. It's this time of the year as well that, if you're lucky, you could see Corey bustard in their breeding displays, and they sort of inflate the neck area, and then they make this really strange whoa noise as they sort of compress this inflated neck. Um, it's really intriguing, fascinating to watch, but quite strange. So just look at that size comparison. It would be nice if one of these springbok walked near to this Corey bustard, because they are huge. So V, it's quite impressive to watch a Corey bustard fly. They've got a massive wingspan. I think it's over 2 meters, and they do make a whoosh sound. It's not often that you get to see them fly, but sometimes when you disturb them, when you drive with a vehicle and so on, and they take off next to you, yeah, you do hear it very loudly, as they've got a lot of weight to take off the ground. And pretty much all birds actually make a sound when they fly. There's only a few of the night birds that don't, particularly owls, that actually soften the sound so that they can hunt in silence, and the insects or the birds or whatever they hunt don't hear them coming. But with the Corey bustard, more terrestrial, they don't really hunt in flight. To fly is just to change of place and transport, as well as to evade predators, etc. But generally, walking on the ground and hunting, quite similar to secretary birds. And this one just taking a rest as well while it has a drink. Looks like the impala is a little bit nervous of him. Big animal reflection there. Looks like we've got a Jerry coming in for a drink. So we've got the heaviest flying bird right there, and we've also got now the tallest land mammal. Looks like a youngster just coming in to join. Now these giraffe are known as the Damara giraffe or the Angolan giraffe, and the smallest of the giraffe species. If we go over to Old Donyo in Kenya, we'll maybe, hopefully, see the Maasai giraffe there, and that being the largest of the giraffe species. So, and with these Damara giraffe, which I prefer to call them, especially when we're in Namibia, um, they're quite a sort of they're not as bulky as a lot of the southern giraffe and the Maasai giraffe. They're smaller, and they're also able to live in a much more rocky environment as well as a drier environment. They can go quite a bit longer without drinking water, as with all the desert adapted species. Um, and as the name suggests, the Damara giraffe occurs a lot in Damara land, which is just north of Swakopmund and to the interior as well. And so this area here, it's not really in Damaraland, but in the direction that we're looking to the west, it's all Damaraland, and then to the north of that would be Coaka land or Coaka Veld, as they call it, um, but occurring a lot in the parts around Damaraland, and it's very rocky. It's the Rocky Desert. In the south towards Sossusvlei, that's what we refer to as the Sandy Desert, but here further north into Damaraland, Kakaland, is what we refer to as the Rocky Desert. And it's sort of split by the Kwieseb River, which flows into the sea around Walvis Bay. And it's amazing to see from the sky how the sand, or the sandy side of the desert, ends at the Kwieseb River, and then to the north of that, the rocks begin. But obviously, you have a very big dune field between Walvis Bay and Swakopmund. That's as a result of the sand being deposited by the ocean and brought out through the predominant wind of the southwesterly. So it has created a dune field there. But in general, going further north from there, it's termed the Rocky Desert. So people often think that the desert equals sand dunes. Yes, this forms a part of it, but it's as a result of the amount of evaporation and versus your transpiration that you have in a particular zone. And they're normally all situated, in fact, they're all situated right adjacent to a cold ocean current. So all the deserts of the world are adjacent to a cold ocean current, and in this case, the Namib being adjacent to the cold Benguela current that comes up from the Antarctica. So obviously then very dry, not much rain, and this is in fact a super desert where the evaporation is 100 times more than the transpiration or the rain. So if you stand still long enough in the desert of Namibia, I think you'll turn to dust as well. So Esna, yeah, when giraffe are born, they're very gangly. They're all legs, um, but they're surprisingly well balanced. It takes them a little bit of time, but with all the antelope and the prey species, as we call them, all the animals that are hunted by predators, they need to be up and running very quickly, otherwise they'll be eaten. So through the ages and through evolution, these are the animals that survive, are the ones that are able to move the quickest. And so I think giraffe have really honed their balancing skills, but it is quite funny to watch when a little baby is born. A shame. They do sort of fall about a bit, but within about half an hour to an hour, they're able to run and follow the mother. Small group of oryx or gemsbok coming in there now. Lovely straight horns.
I started watching WildEarth during COVID. I decided that I wanted to study more, and I saw that Eco Training Pridelands was doing courses, and I decided to do the 8-week online theory course at the end of last year. There's just so much out there to learn and to experience.
Sign up for an Eco Training digital course today with the promo code to receive 200 Rand off.
So you can see the giraffe rather nervous. It's generally the youngsters. The younger the giraffe, the less nervous they are. And they can, in fact, be very curious. I think they just haven't learnt the dangers that present themselves out here in the wild. And the older they get, the more wise they get, but the more scared they get as well. So you very often even see little young giraffes, particularly in their first year, going up to vehicles or walk, being curious of humans. They're even curious sometimes of predators. And so the highest mortality rate in giraffe is within that first year. And the youngsters are seemingly a little bit silly and not really realizing the dangers that are out there. Okay, another nice, lovely stop, and great to see these giraffe that have come down. But I think let's head back to the Madikwe Game Reserve on the border of Botswana, because we've got our Loxodonta africana that have returned. So off we go. looks to be a couple of bulls. Yes, there's definitely one. But generally, when you see just a couple of individuals at the waterhole, it's normally males, bulls. This one on the left looking a little bit younger than the one on the right. They often do pair up, sometimes in a small group as well. It can be 3, 4, 5 of them. Do like a bit of company. The older they get, the seemingly more solitary they become. And then, obviously, when they go into the periods of must and a much higher phase of testosterone levels running through and coursing through their bodies, that's when they go looking for the females. But other than that, they seem to like to be alone or in small groups and just very happy-go-lucky. And this waterhole seems to have filled up quite nicely with water. I think it is artificially fed as well. It probably was a natural waterhole, but now they'll keep it permanent, just topping it up, especially through the dry periods when there isn't any rain, just making sure that the animals do have water. But it was quite low in the last few months, and now it seems to be quite full. So nice for the animals. So yellow duck, well, with the particular size of elephants, that is one of the reasons why they're successful, and obviously the evolution would have helped with that, being the largest land mammals, the heaviest. So that's one thing that really assists. But another very big part of their successful or their success is that they're excellent mothers, and they also all work together as a group. The breeding herds, the younger females, they assist, even if they don't have babies themselves, they assist the females with babies. And so it's a real family or group effort from the breeding herds. They all look after the little babies, and I think a very, very big part, and probably the largest part of why they have been successful um, right across the board. But yes, when there are predators around, they hate predators, whether it's wild dogs, lions, leopards, hyenas. Hyenas, not as much, but you'll always know when there is a predator around, the elephants will trumpet and chase them, and they just truly despise them. Still that Deirdre's cuckoo calling in the background. Truly summer sound. We don't hear them in winter because they are migratory. So this younger bull looks like he's had enough of drinking. Now it's time to cool off and maybe a little bit of fun. What you'll see is they normally grab a bit of, they like to muddy the water so that it sticks to them. And then they'll spray it behind their ears, under their chest, and onto the belly, sometimes over the sides of them, and also over the top of their back. They cover themselves quite significantly. So this bull on the left looks to be around about 16 years of age or so. He's a teenager, whereas the one on the right, looking a little bit bigger, is probably, lower to mid-20s, I would say. Both of them still reasonably young, but obviously this one on the left is quite a bit younger than this bigger bull on the right, but not too much of an age gap. So Mishka, yeah, that's a good question about relations between the elephants. It's always possible that they could be from the same mother or the same father. So yes, it definitely is possible, but the chances are that they most likely aren't. And generally, what happens is with the young bulls, they'll be in the breeding herd until they sort of hit about 12 years old or so, 12, 13 years. And then they just become a little bit boisterous. They start to, go into must. And so they do start sort of trying their chances with the females, and they're not receptive to the youngsters. They can then be pushed out by the females, especially when they're boisterous around the little babies, which they very often do become. And then the big females start pushing them out. Then they start following the herd from a distance, and they can do that for different periods of time. Sometimes it's just a couple of months, sometimes even weeks. But it can go on. It depends on the individual, because each individual elephant has got its own personality traits. So some of them will move off quicker, and some of them will stay longer. So it's very much like humans. Some kids will leave their house very quickly. Some others take a little bit longer, and they're not quite as mature as soon. So there's a lot of similarities between elephants and humans, and this being one of them. And eventually, then they'll normally follow another bull who's quite happy for him to be around. And if he is too boisterous, he just gets put in his place. So he then learns from an older solitary bull and follows with him and feels a little bit safe being around him. Because they do often feel anxious. You can often see it when you're in the presence of a young bull and he's on his own. They just do quite similar behavior in the sense that you can understand they're anxious. They try and make themselves look bigger. They put on a much more of a show, make a lot more noise, and try and intimidate you that way. Whereas the older, bigger bulls, they don't really put their ears out and try and make themselves look bigger. They're very confident, and so they're lovely animals to watch. But you very often get these sort of warning charges from the youngsters who are actually just quite anxious and nervous and not quite sure of themselves just yet.
Are you in search of a unique, unforgettable adventure in the wild? Imagine living with the animals you see on TV while getting an inside look at how a live safari TV show operates. We're thrilled to offer this experience through our 7, 14 and 28-day EcoCam experiences. To book your spot, visit wildearth.tv/EcoCam. Come and join us for the bush experience of a lifetime.
It's amazing to actually see the accuracy of the elephants when they are spraying themselves. Obviously, the older they get, the more accurate they become. And the youngsters, obviously, still trying to work out their trunks, not as good and not as accurate as the older individuals. So it's also nice to just see the tail on an elephant. It's not often that you get to see it nice and close, but it's almost like wire, plastic wire. That's the thickness of their hair. And there's a lovely African curio that you can get with they make bangles out of the hairs of elephants, and you'll be surprised how thick that hair is. When I first saw it, I almost thought it was plastic, but very, very similar and makes for wonderful curios. Right, so Scott, you want to know how to sex the elephants from their foreheads. So if you look at this bull, it would be nice if he sort of presents his head straight on at us. Um, Sort of at the just behind the eye, you can obviously see the temple. It's quite an indent there, but then with the bulls, it's a lot more square and almost protruding outwards. And when you see the females, there's a lot more indentation to it. And it would be nice if we see some females. Hopefully, there will be a breeding herd that comes in, and then we can actually compare the two. And I'll show you. It's quite subtle, but it's almost difficult for me to say just by looking at this one, because we want to compare. And that's quite similar with the aging of elephants. You also want to see a few different ages next to each other, and then you can very easily explain it. But that if I can just say it like that, and when we do see some females next to the males, then I'll explain it nicely to you as we can, when we can actually see it. But if I can say that, a lot less indentations on the males and a lot squarer, whereas the females sort of it looks a lot more fine. Um, that's about the only way I can explain it. Looks like he's had enough. He's cooled off. He's quenched his thirst, and he's following that younger male off to the left. And at the same time, we've got a nice herd of zebra making their way through. We do see a lot of elephants coming through here, so I'm pretty sure before the end of the show, there will be some breeding herds coming through as well. This is the best time of the year to see elephants at the Waterhole, around midday. It's obviously all around the temperature, and them coming to cool off. Pretty much regular on a daily basis. And very often, what you'll find the animals doing is also conserving their energy, and that goes with thermoregulation too. When it's very hot, it obviously takes quite a bit of energy to keep cool. So, this is the time of the day as we head into midday. It's probably the period of the least amount of activity. So, the highest inactivity period, especially in summer when it's very hot, right across the board with all the animals. And then they'll spend this time of the day coming to get a drink and then heading off into the shade. As it cools off, then they start moving and going to feed and doing any of the other activities that they might do. Uh, Even mating and looking for females and fighting, etc. But generally, this time of the day, I think the animals also do like to have a bit of a sleep if they can, because it goes the same with the predators as well. They're also the least active. So I always used to, and still do, when I'm in the bush or in the game reserves, I like to go running in the heat of the day, because you don't want to run in the bush where there's no fences and there's lions and leopards around. So because if you run in the bush, you become food and you can be attacked by lions and leopards, etc. But if I go running in a big 5 game reserve, I'll always do it during the heat of the day, and then I don't really worry about predators. A small group of zebra like this, you would think that it's a harem with one male or a stallion and is a couple of females. Very difficult to tell between male and female zebra. I still find it difficult unless you see the obvious parts. Somebody once told me that you can tell between male and female zebra by looking at the stripe patterns on their legs. And I can't remember the exact sort of setup that you could, what the males had different to the females. But if anybody knows anything about that theory, send it through and we can debate it or try and work it out and see if it's correct. But I've never been able to work that one out, as I say. And so I find it difficult to sex zebra unless the males show themselves, which they often do as well. I always think that zebra got the second best fly swat tail in the bush, only bested by a giraffe, which I think is probably the best fly swat out there. So, Harold, there can be a little bit of sort of body language communication with their tails swishing around, but it's mainly just to keep the flies at bay. and obviously just keeping them off their nether regions, because they can bite the flies as well, and that's where they go for. So it's just trying to keep them off, and that's mainly what animals' tails are for, is to swish around and keep the pests, the parasites at bay. But as I say, it can give a little bit of body language. If you look at the likes of rhino and elephants, you can tell a lot about their mood by their tails. If they curl up, that's a very anxious mode that they're in, and it can even mean that they're angry and they're going to charge. But if it's swaying from side to side, that's normally indicative of a very calm animal.
Wild babies, little bits of heaven sent down to earth to stumble and tumble their way into our hearts. Join us as we celebrate and find as many wild babies as we can on Safari Live. Vote for who you think is the most adorable. Prepare your hearts for a cuteness overload. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
Okay, with the elephants leaving, I think we'll do the same, and we're just going to continue on the ping pong between Madikwe and the Etosha National Park. Let's head off to Okukuyu. Where the giraffe haven't disappointed, and they've hung around and seemingly getting their drinks in as well. So now this definitely looks like a bull on the left, and then a female that's busy urinating, and then that male is now just licked some of the urine and then performing the Flehmen grimace, as you saw there. It's almost like exposing the teeth, but in so doing, it's flexing the vomeronasal organ. Can you say that? Vomeronasal organ, which is also known as the Jacobson's organ. Um, very difficult to pronounce. Vomeronasal organ. Um, and then that interprets the urine of the female and sends the message to the brain. And when I say this the sort of signals of the female, where she is in her estrus cycle, and potentially if she's going to be willing to mate, etc. And so it might seem a little bit disgusting what they're doing for us as humans, but that's a very important way for them to tell between male and female, especially the males trying to seek an understanding of where the female is within her biological cycles. And so they do that regularly. Most mammals will do it, if not all of them. And you'll see lions doing it, you see zebra doing it. And very interesting when you do see them flexing that vomeronasal organ, Jacobson's organ, as it is called. So Bonnie Go from the UK. Yes, giraffe are water dependent, Bonnie Girl, but these Damara giraffe, they're more adapted to a dry environment and desert conditions, so they can go for longer without drinking. But like the southern giraffe that we'll see at all of the other locations, bar Kenya with the Maasai giraffe, all of them are water dependent, and they wouldn't survive very easily in these parts where it's so dry. So especially going west from here, it's extremely dry, but there are some sort of springs and water points that the animals do access, and very similar to the desert adapted elephants. It's not a different species of elephant, it's also Loxodonta africana, but they're able to go for up to about 10 days without water, and so they're just more adapted to a desert and dry conditions. And I often liken it to the Khoisan people that used to also inhabit and still do a lot of the Kalahari Desert. They're able to survive in these dry conditions, but they're exactly the same species, humans, but more adapted to that dry conditions. And it is believed that they also had expandable stomachs because, when they used to kill animals and get meat, very hot, very dry environment, so the meat would obviously very quickly rot. So they would eat as much as they could and fill their stomachs, and then they could go for long periods without eating, almost like a lion, but adapted to these specific conditions. Now, if you had to throw a bushman into an Arctic condition, very cold, icy, he probably wouldn't last very long. And you could say the same for Eskimos, for instance. Or the Sherpas of the Himalayas, who are able to live in very high altitude environments and lots of white blood cells, so very low oxygen level requirement for them. And that's why they're breaking records now of climbing all these major peaks around the world, etc., unassisted and all of that. So I think, a particular species can still be very well adapted to specific conditions in its environment, that if you change those conditions, especially very quickly, it wouldn't be able to survive very well. So the Angolan giraffe, yes, able to survive in a lot less or having to drink a lot less water, but they still are dependent on it.
This immersive program will give you an in-depth understanding of the African bush in as little as 7 days. You'll be guided by expert trainers who will lead you through the various ecosystems of Africa and teach you essential bush skills. Join Eco Training's 7 or 14-day EcoQuest course and you will receive 500 Rand off whether you sign up locally or internationally using this promo code. Further your journey as a true bush enthusiast today.
Horns. And then that I would always say to my guests is like putting your two pinkies together, and those are the females. So thumbs for the males, pinkies for the females. And obviously, the more animals there are at the waterhole, the more relaxed they become, because they understand that there's more of them around, and the more of them that there are around, the less chance that they are going to be eaten by a predator. And I often liken it to when I go surfing, the more guys that are surfing in the water with me, the less chance I have of getting taken out by a shark. So, yeah, safety in numbers, and that goes for humans and for springbok. Now, this waterhole being very busy, and it's wonderful to sit at this waterhole in person and actually just watch the animals as they come and go. And there's some lovely waterhole chalets that you can actually sit in the comfort or just outside your chalet, nicely in the shade, and watch as the animals come and go. And if there's anything very interesting that comes in, you're just a few meters away from the viewing platform. So It's a wonderful spot to go to and a world-class game reserve. Nice to see the oryx also now come into the water, and you can see what I was talking about. It's between those two who like to swim and go deeper in the water itself. But I would say that the gemsbok are probably the ones that enjoy it the most, followed by the springbok. Sounds like a dark-capped bulbul that's calling in the background. We also call it a toppie in Afrikaans because of that sort of like little hat it has on. The bigger bird in the water now, I think that's probably an Egyptian goose. There was a question about which waterfowl occur here, and so now the two that I spoke of are in the water. I think it is an Egyptian goose. So a little bit of shade now coming through as these clouds build. I wonder if there might be a little bit of drops as the day goes on. Ah, looks like there's a blue wildebeest moving in the background. All alone, most likely a bull. So I'm expecting some elephants to come through at any stage now. This is the time for them to come down for a drink, particularly here in Okukuyu. Alrighty, so we've really enjoyed being at Jamala in Madikwe Game Reserve, as well as here at Okukuyu. But it is time for us to also have a look at all the different Africam waterholes. So a wonderful partnership with Africam, and as you can see in the top left corner, we now are at Africam Tau. It's also in the Madikwe Game Reserve, just a little bit further to the north of Jamala, but nice to see that here too, it's also turned a lot more green in the last few weeks. So that's wonderful for the animals. And here at this waterhole, which we've just had to go away. So sorry about that. There's just a little bit of technical difficulties there. So we'll sort that out. And then, as I was saying, a lot of waterfowl at the Africam Tau waterhole. So hopefully we'll get to see lots of them. But nonetheless, still lots of activity here in the Great White Place, aka Etosha. Now this whistle, I think that's a white-crowned shrike. That sound there. Interesting little white and black bird, more white than black, with that quite striking call as well. That's a drongo calling now, with his typical R2D2. It might have been him that was mimicking a white-crowned shrike. Not quite sure. It might have been both of them. Remembering that drongos are very good mimickers, so you can very often get confused. And without having been able to see these birds, I wouldn't be able to tell. But there's definitely a drongo, which means there could have been a drongo mimicking, or there could have been a white-crowned shark as well as a drongo. And always lots of movement. And what's interesting to note as well is that the true desert animals, right across the board, have white bellies. So you'll see the blue wildebeest there. It's obviously not a truly adapted desert mammal, an antelope, or whatever you want to call it. So compared to the springbok with its true white belly, the oryx, the gemsbok, also got a white belly, as well as the likes of ground squirrels. They also water independent. So A lot of the animals with white bellies are those animals that are able to survive in desert conditions. And it does help to reflect the heat back off the ground. So, all, you know, down to thermoregulation, which assists in water retention, and all part of the evolutionary traits.
What if you could explore the world from an entirely new perspective? Flying a real drone live without leaving home. This is Nature Eye. Discover our planet's landscapes with a personal guide and a powerful camera. Every flight helps conserve the locations you visit. Book your adventure with Nature Eye.
Well, I bet you all guessed I had disappeared. Well, I haven't. I've just been in the background and we were just sorting out a couple of technical difficulties. But anyway, the show goes on and the animals continue ebbing and flowing here at the Okokoyo Waterhole in the Etosha National Park. Lots of springbok, as per usual. If you're going to bet on an animal being here at this waterhole, you could bet on a springbok. Well, that goes without saying that you should bet on a springbok all round. It does look like, though, however, that the clouds are dissipating a little bit. And like I said earlier, if there has been a little bit of rain, well, it cools it down for a very short period. And once the sun comes out, it's even hotter than before. So I'm sure that will drive a lot of animals more so to come down for a drink. Still waiting on our elephants, though. And the oryx on the opposite bank, I often say that they seem to command the most respect out of all the antelope here at the waterhole. Obviously, when the elephants come down, everybody makes way for them. But very often, when there's lots of oryx, all the other animals give them quite a bit of space because, as you can imagine, those huge weapons they've got on their heads and the way that they can use them as well in a stabbing motion. So if I was an antelope, I'd also steer clear. I found many, through my treks that we used to do in Damaraland, and I will be continuing on next year again, that we often come across oryx, dead oryx, with a horn broken off inside them. And then you often see bulls with only one horn. So, yeah, they do fight a lot, and it does then result sometimes in death. Now, this sounds like white-fronted bee-eaters. That That's a nice bit.
Eco Training's professional field guide course can make your dreams a reality. This comprehensive program comprises 5 months of theoretical and practical training in the African bush with highly qualified instructors in multiple locations. Enroll today and receive 5,000 Rand off using the promo code. If you've just finished school or tertiary education and you want to head into the wild, Eco Training's professional field guide course is for you.
And I was reading an article this morning, and they're talking about that they're going to be tarring the main roads within the Etosha National Park, which is, I think, both great and bad news. I think great because if you've ever driven around Etosha, the corrugation's really bad. You know, it's just gravel roads all around. So there's a tar road coming in here at the main gate to Okukuyu, and then there's a tar road from Namatoni to the eastern gate as well. So just those two entrances where the roads are tarred, and then from there it's gravel roads, but it's white gravel because of this calcrete rocks. Now, it's 60 kilometers from Okukuyu to more or less to Halali, which is the camp in the middle, and then more or less 60 kilometers from there to Namatoni. And obviously with quite a network of game drive roads, but all gravel, and they need to be graded regularly. So there's obviously quite a big budget for that. And if they're not graded regularly, and at least before the season starts, the corrugations really get bad. And then obviously, as a result, a lot of vehicle breakdowns, shocks are destroyed, lots of flat tires, etc. So they do want to upgrade the roads because if they do, it's a very thin layer of tarmac. They say that it can last for up to 15 years, and it's actually a better budgeted way of doing things. Now, I don't know if they're going to, I think they said it was about 250 kilometers worth of tarring that they are going to do, costing in the region of about 250 or 200 million Namibian dollars. So it's an expensive affair. It will also take quite a bit of work. and will be great for driving between those camps. And will be better for the vehicles. However, I do worry about speeding, because as soon as there's tar roads, then people start to pick up speed and drive, between the different camps, both tourists and staff members. So that's the one bad side to it, and then we might be finding a little bit more roadkill. So I do just plead with people that do go once the tar is complete to just keep their speed down to a minimum. You're in the game reserve after all, so we don't want to be seeing dead animals next to the road. It's also incredible, in Etosha, how you can notice. It was only just very recently that they opened up the western side of the park to the general public. Just to the north of Okukuyu, as you go up towards Okondeka, which is another waterhole right on the edge of the Etosha Pan itself, you would sort of take a left, and so heading west, and then there would be a sign that nobody's allowed past there, other than local tour operators. And so, myself working for local tour operators, we used to get permits to be able to go through the western side and then come out at Ochivasandu, which then leads to Hobatere and the sort of western wilderness there going into Kakaland, etc. But because that area was closed off to the general public, only open to local tour operators as well as researchers, there also were no game drive sort of routes on that side. There's only a couple that just lead to waterholes off of the main road. But driving on that western side and on that route, the wildlife in general were very scared of the vehicle. And when you saw animals, they just ran away, and that includes zebra, wildebeest, and we even you can see sable on that side where you see nowhere else in the park. But they weren't used to vehicles, so they ran away. And slowly now they are still just getting used to vehicles, and so you see them a lot closer now. But it's still taking a lot of time. And you compare that with the animals on the eastern, or from the central to the eastern side. Sometimes you have to almost, clap your hands out the door to get the zebra out of the way, because they literally have no fear of the vehicles, and because they see it day in and day out. So I think they probably liken it to just another big animal, a harmless animal. And we've even had the lions using the vehicle as cover to hunt for zebra. Elephants coming right up to the vehicles, very, very calm and used to all the touristy vehicles. And just interesting, though, to note the contrast of where there hasn't been any vehicles on the western side, but now they're slowly learning. Now, this bull really getting stuck in now. I hope he maybe even goes for a swim and rolls around. They often do that too. And just putting on a lovely show for any of the tourists that will be here around lunchtime, because there's a lovely viewing platform off on the right. But you can view almost up until, so it's like it runs around this waterhole, and it ends almost where the leadwood trees off on the left. So, but you can stand even a little bit forward of where this camera is. This camera is on a pole, actually right where there used to be a huge sociable weaver's nest. I think they might have taken it down because they would have been interfering with the cameras, and there would have been a lot of chirping and probably pooing on the cameras themselves, etc. So I think maybe that's why they removed the sociable weaver's nest here. But it used to be lovely to go underneath it, and you watch all the birds coming in and out. They're very chirpy little weavers, and they're also very relaxed around people as well. You can get quite close to them. Um, but having said that, uh, I made the mistake once, and it was when I first went to Etosha. The first time with a group, I was a handlanger, as we call it. I was still training with overlanding safaris, and I pitched my tent up under a lovely shade of sociable weaver's nest. And little, so it was lovely during the day when I first got there. I had the best shade. But then very quickly realized as it went into darkness and I wanted to go to bed that all the weavers had returned into their nests. Firstly, they were very loud. They chirped the whole night. You know, beep, 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 beep. They're chatting, and I don't know what they're talking about, but making a hell of a racket. And also woke up with bird poo all over my tent in the morning. So it was firstly that I couldn't sleep, and then took quite a bit of work to clean off my canvas tent of all this uric acid that they deposited on my tent. So, yeah, there's another trick. If you do go to Namibia and Etosha in general, don't sleep or pitch your tent underneath a sociable weaver's nest, because you won't sleep and you'll have a mess in the morning. April, nice comment. You love the elephants at Okukuyu. Well, absolutely. It's a For me, it's the best part of the hot days, especially at this time of the year, when the elephants come through and they just really put on a show. So it sort of fills up the day because early in the morning, you obviously head out on game drive. And then you come back, you go for a swim at the pool, grab a drink or whatever, take your binoculars and a bird book, and come down here. And then they just put on a show for you. So, and it's always very impressive. Some of the largest elephants in the world, both here and in Kenya. Um, and it's just fantastic to sit and watch it. So, yeah, I must agree with you, April.
Is your heart easily stolen by small paws and soft sores? The season just keeps on getting cuter. Come along for a Wild Babies Fireside Chat. Join our naturalists for the final debate on who the cutest baby in the wild is. Stay tuned for more adorableness on a screen near you. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
Everybody has now cracked open a cold one. Maybe you have a G&T in hand, or perhaps, I don't know, whatever you might be drinking, because it is Saturday, of course, and it's 1 o'clock somewhere. And it's so hot in Hoedspruit at the moment. You might not even know it. I could be sitting in the swimming pool right now with my laptop out, just catching a tan. You'll never know. No, I'm just teasing. I'm not, though, but I've contemplated it. Except I don't have enough shade around the pool, so I thought my computer will probably overheat, so I won't be doing that until I get an umbrella. But as you know, this is live and interactive, so if you do have any questions, make sure you pop them in the question box on the WildEarth website, or if you're using the app, and we can chat about all of the things. It's nice that this elephant bull has come down to drink. I think I heard Ralph say that the elephant was 28 minutes late. if only if only the elephants could hear us and understand that we need them to provide content for us. Otherwise it gets a little bit quiet and difficult to chat about new things. I have scoured the internet for all sorts of new research documents, and I feel like all of us have spoken about pretty much similar things, but I have found a couple of new articles which we'll hopefully get into in a little bit. But I hope the weather is lovely where you are, or at least if it's cold, miserable, maybe even snowing while you're watching the show, this can bring some sunshine into your life. Although it's not the same, I suppose, but it's better than nothing. Maybe you can all tell me, just to get the chats going, if there is anybody that wants to chat with me, please chat with me. I don't like talking to myself. What was what's been your favorite moments of the show so far with Ralph? There we go. Catherine said she's having an apple cinnamon cider while she watches. You see, there we go. That's that's a nice one. We don't get apple cinnamon ciders in South Africa, unfortunately, but we get all sorts of other things. Can you imagine these poor animals? All they drink is water. Well, I suppose when they're young, they suckle and they have milk for a very short period of their life, some a little bit longer, but never have tasted apple juice or orange juice or anything really other than murky brown miserable water. At least the elephants are smart enough to go for the inlets of where these pump pans that are constantly filled up. You know, as they start to dry out, they'll typically go for that because we know that they like fresher water. But who have we got? Just a couple of springbuck. Who's that? Wildebeest at the back and a few zebras. Apologies, every now and then we seem to be getting a little bit, I don't know if it's maybe just my feed, but it freezes every now and then. Hopefully it's just on my side and not on your end. Probably making the zebras a little bit nervous. Not too bad though. It surprises me that the animals can be quite jumpy around this waterhole in particular, especially to sounds. Actually, can we have a look? There's a bird on the sort of left-hand corner of the waterhole, and it's bobbing around in the water. What is that? Is it? Please don't be an Egyptian goose. I'll be very sad if it's an Egyptian goose. But as you know, these cameras are super tricky to navigate, so we're going to get there shortly, and there is a little bit of a delay. So just bear with us for a second. As we're going closer, it's starting to reveal itself and looking more and more like an Egyptian goose. Okie dokie, we're gonna go. I'm not 100% convinced. Is that an Egyptian goose? It looks like it's got quite a white face, but then again, Egyptian geese do have a slightly paler face. I was hoping it was going to be something else, maybe like a new bird species, but I think that's wishful thinking, to be quite honest. But just, elephants, they got to splash themselves full of water or go for a swim. We see the springbuck go into the water too, the zebra. I haven't seen the wildebeest go in very deep. But birds too have to try and cool themselves down. So by water bathing, not only do you accomplish that, but also it's a great opportunity to give your feathers a bit of a wash down. And now the Egyptian goose is just doing a bit of preening. They do have a preen gland, so the water doesn't really saturate their feathers completely. It does run off, but there will be some parts of it that they need to just dry in the sun. It's funny that I haven't seen the wildebeest move quite deep into the water. We know they can swim, that's for sure. They're pretty strong swimmers. Maybe these ones not so much because they don't have to practice as often, but definitely the wildebeest in East Africa that are part of the migration and continuously moving around. I suppose all animals, though, they do migrate. We'll get into that in just a moment. And when they cross that river, sometimes the Mara River is flowing quite quickly and it can be very deep. It's rocky and slippery. And then, of course, there's crocodiles. You got to be a good swimmer, otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a bit of trouble. Okay, I think what we're going to do now, so we take a break from Okukuyo. You've had quite some time watching this waterhole. We're going to head over to Jamala now in Madikwe and see if that waterhole's bustling with life. Yay! Elephants! Lots of them. Shame, look at that little calf on the right-hand side, desperately trying to stand between mom's legs. Doesn't look like it's suckling, but trying to keep cool. There's no trees around this waterhole, so that's why they just come and go so quickly. There's no point if you can't stand in the shade. But with the adults being so big, those little ones are able to stand in the shadows. Shame, it's tiny still. That must be maybe only a month and a bit, maybe closer to 2 months old. I was trying to look at the length of its trunk, because when they're born, it's so short. You see how that trunk is extended down quite a bit. Not quite touching the ground just yet, but still able to slink under mom's belly. So just a few months old. One elephant had its trunk up in the air. Maybe there's something happening to the left-hand side of the screen. Well, there we go. Few more elephants. I love the two different colors that we can see at the moment. Same species, don't worry. Just those few that haven't come down for a drink yet. On the left-hand side, covered in the red dust. And then the ones on the right who have just had a splish and a splash and kind of got more of the clay on them now. But they might turn red. We'll see if they come around this side. They normally like to dust bath. You can see just in front of the camera on the left hand, or yeah, on the left hand side. All that soil is nice and loose from the elephants constantly kicking it up. And of course, in Egyptian geese. I don't know what to say about geese anymore. Well, specifically the Egyptian geese. Just as I was saying when we were at Okukuyo, how the elephants know where to go to get the freshest of fresh water. Let's see if this lot is going to do just that. I'm not sure if these individuals are actually part of the same herd. Let's see what the interactions are like. And immediately see that cow, how she stepped back just a little bit, and how the elephant on the left kind of slowed down. Trunks are out, and she seems to move off. Feeling the pressure, there's quite a few more elephants there on the left hand side coming in, so they might just get out of the way. But elephants aren't always, you know, I can't say ugly, that's not the right word. Let me think of a word to use. Not as tolerant is probably better with other breeding herds of elephants, especially during dry season. But now that's all about to change as there's so much water around. And see that youngster on the left still wanting to mingle, perhaps wanting to find another elephant of a similar age to play with, not chasing after its small family. You can see the little elephants just standing in the middle with the adults. Oh, it must be so hot. I didn't actually get to see what the temperature was in Madikwe today. I mean, I say it's hot in Hoedspruit. It's really not. We've had such a mild summer so far. We've had some hot days, but in October and November are excruciating. Before the rains arrived, and we haven't really had a proper rainy season just yet. We've had a few days where it's been really cold, which is unusual with a fair amount of rain. But typically we get it more frequently at this time of the year. So I'm going to guess, and then hopefully someone's going to tell me. I think it's probably about between 35 and 37 degrees in Madikwe. Just thinking if it's about 32 here in Hoedspruit, it's much further north. My goodness, I was far off. Apparently, it's about 33 degrees Celsius, 92 Fahrenheit. 33, 33. My bad. So that's interesting. That's not much hotter than here, which is unusual because typically the temperatures are much hotter just further north in South Africa. It's so much more arid up there, and the soil just bakes and bakes and bakes. I mean, I was walking around outside because I was scooping the leaves from the swimming pool, and it was unbearable. I was barefoot, and I could not stand on the ground. I was, constantly kicking up the water. But again, I've got very sensitive, delicate feet because we wrap them up in shoes, and we very rarely, I suppose, actually, not many people end up, feeling the earth with their toes. We do it a lot in South Africa, and in Hoedspruit, most of the time people walk around barefoot. But our feet aren't quite as calloused as an elephant's foot. I mean, they get used to it as they get older. They become quite rough, and it's evident in their tracks where you see the little grooves. If you haven't seen an elephant footprint, maybe you must Google one and just have a look, and you can see what I am talking about. But those little elephants, when they're first born, their feet are as smooth as a baby's bottom. So I'm sure it must be quite hot for the first little while until they start getting used to it. I don't think it will take them very long for their feet to sort of start toughening up.
Attention all teachers. Round up your bundles of joy and get comfortable because WildEarth Kids Safaris are here to stay. Go to our website and sign your class up for a special virtual safari with interactive learning tailored for kids.
Good afternoon or good morning, boys and girls from all over the world.
Spoil your kids with some wild fun for 1 hour every weekday on our afternoon drives. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
There's some more elephants. I think we could probably just see the Ellies coming in and out today, which is great because Yesterday was so quiet. There was a couple of things happening, but really not much. So it's great to see the big herd, well, not big herds, but the multiple herds coming in. I'm already starting to miss dry season. Nothing pleases us, right? Aren't we so demanding all the time? It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too dry, then it's too wet. It always makes me chuckle. But I am grateful, of course, for seeing all these animals. Yolanda, you've said that you are just loving these elephants. Absolutely. I completely agree. I think I say this every single day. We just love to sit and spend time with elephants. Although there is a large population of people that are absolutely terrified of elephants, which makes me really sad because they are such peaceful creatures. They provide so much therapy. Well, at least in my opinion. I know there's lots of people that agree with that though. So I always feel yeah sad for people that are scared of them and that only want to look at them, 200 meters away. Perhaps the individuals that are scared of elephants, spending some time at Jamala and watching watching the elephants from the comfort of your room, or perhaps you're in the swimming pool because there is a swimming pool and a deck just behind the camera. Maybe that would be a better way to view them, or at least to get used to them of all. And I go on game drives quite often with some friends that own a house in Jajani. Some of you may have heard of Jajani because it's just north of Pridelands. It's just on the other side of the northern boundary, and it's a property where people have houses, almost like a share block, if you will. You're not allowed to live there permanently, but you can go in. I don't know. There's X amount of weeks or days. I don't really know the ins and outs of that. Uh, and why was I going to tell? Oh, I was going to tell you because a few of my friends are really, really scared of elephants. And since we've been going on drives, it's always nice to get them to drive the car, the game drive vehicle, because then you are the decision maker when you're behind the steering wheel. And it's been great to see how a lot of them have calmed down because we'll sit and watch elephants and then we discuss animal behavior. We'll look and we'll watch the elephants and I'll say to them, but maybe, well, I do this with guests as well, and I used to do it a lot with students. Like, what do you think that elephant is not necessarily thinking, because we can't go, oh, the elephant was, is thinking, oh, I wish I could have a piece of chocolate cake. Not those kinds of things, but like, what kind of behavior do you think it's exhibiting? And everybody just looks for the obvious signs, and once they start to realize that you can actually tell more about an elephant just by looking at its trunk and the position of its ears and its tail, you can get a better understanding. But that just takes a lot of practice and a lot of reading about that type of behavior, and then actually sitting in person and then witnessing it. But you can also practice it here with us. So if you want to ask any questions about the behaviors of elephants, or maybe you are a little bit nervous, and perhaps going into the Kruger National Park or Pilanesberg or any of the different national parks in South Africa, or even in East Africa, where you can drive around and view these beautiful creatures, it might be worth it to just having a look about it. I always talk about this one website. Definitely hop over to a site called Elephant Voices and check them out. There's some amazing information about elephants. But for the most part, you can see these elephants are quite relaxed. One swishing its tail, but only because the insects are biting. But nothing else really happening with them. Are those hardy-eater ibis that have just landed? Oh my goodness. Best we get a close view because this is 100%. a new bird species for me at Jamala. Not a lifer. I've seen plenty of hardy ibises in my life, but it's always nice to catch them or catch a different type of bird that I haven't actually had a chance to chat about. Woohoo! I'm very excited, as you can tell. But as you know, there's a slight delay in the cameras, so we'll just get that all sorted and hopefully they stay put. Look at them. Man, I think this is the most excited I've ever been in my entire life to see a hardy dar. I mean, I love them. They're fun to watch, but, we're quite spoiled. So easy birds to identify, sort of uniform brownish black color, but they do have iridescence on their feathers. So sometimes you can see sort of greens and sometimes purple, like not purple, it's more like a magenta color, in fact. But they've just come down to have a drink of water, and there was a pair of them. But like most of the birds, they're all breeding at this time of the year. I know that these are adults because you can see that very prominent white streak underneath the eye. When they're younger and have not fledged just yet, you don't typically see that. It comes in with their adult plumage. But one of the other diagnostic features is that big, long beak. Now, there are lots of different bird species that have long beaks, but for the most part, ibises look very similar. They come in different colors, but for the most part, they have this general shape. Let's see if it's going to feed for us. Yay, the second one. My goodness, what a Saturday. Well, there we go. So now you can see the ibises are starting to investigate around this little island that they're on with their beaks. And just like a lot of birds that have got these really long beaks, they have a special adaptation. They've got a sensory nerve that runs down the length of their bill, and they are probers. So they can't necessarily see the prey that they're looking for because they don't feed on any vegetation. They'll eat insects, and I suppose ibises that spend a bit more time around the water might also feast on like mollusks and that type of thing. But then they'll probe around in this mud, so not necessarily in a substrate that's quite hard, but rather the soft stuff where there's going to be some life, living in there. So maybe some larvae, but I think a couple of aquatic, invertebrates that'll be around here too. So once they probe it in for the first time, that's typically not that one at the top. That one at the top is still drinking.